the most challenged and responded pieces of art that I've ever made, and where I've had like a reaction, was when I painted with my period blood. And I thought I'd come on right now and talk about what that was like and some of those things around that 2 years later. So, for context, I am a woman. I started my periods when I was 11. I was in primary school, and it was it felt like quite a traumatic time, because at the time I wasn't able to get the support from my mum at the time. Not her fault, but she wasn't well. And then I went on a trip and I went away with school, so I wasn't around to get that support. So it was quite a stressful time for me. And then 2 years ago, age 45, I had my last ever period. So a little bit more than 2 years ago. And that was quite eye-opening, really, because when a lot of people kind of, like, what was going on for me was that I was experiencing a lot of tough times with my periods, very heavy periods, a lot of illness, heavy periods due to fibroids, due to I was having bad anemia, really heavy anemia, so I was exhausted a lot of the time. And I previously had a myomectomy, which is to remove the fibroids, and then they'd grown back. So actually there was a lot of feelings around this. I felt a lot of shame around this, that why have I let them grow back? And actually it wasn't my fault, but a lot of the conversations that I was feeling and hearing around at the time was about that it was related to my stress levels and trauma, and the message that gave to my nervous system and my subconscious mind, my inner child, was that it was my fault because I hadn't looked after myself properly. I'd maybe eaten too much sugar, or I'd maybe not managed my stress levels very well. But that was just nonsense, because actually, whilst there's a connection, there is a correlation between mental and physical health, there's nothing that can be proved. And there's such a low amount of research for women's health compared to men's, and such a, like, fibroids and endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome, all those sorts of things that I can barely say, let alone other people really understand. It makes sense that there isn't much research on it, and it started to be a bit more like recently, but I suppose that's because that's a field that I've had to look up myself. I've had to do my own research, and I've had to, like, work through this. So I found it interesting that I struggled so much with, like, having periods, and it was one of those things that I don't have children, and I think that actually periods can have a different meaning, I feel, if you've got children, if you've given birth, if your uterus and your periods have served that biological purpose. And actually, I was once asked the question about all of this, and asked, why are your ovaries so angry? And it got me really reflecting on that, and there's lots of self-development that I've done to question all of those things, and, like, we can really personify and embody emotions inside our bodies. And it made me think about how I wasn't expressing myself. And whilst I my myomectomy was in 2013, so I was a art teacher at the time, and not long after I left to become an art therapist. And that this part of the narrative of this is that I wasn't expressing myself fully, and barely at all really, and I wasn't fulfilling a life that aligned with me, that felt good for me, that was what I wanted to do. So that's where I knew that I needed to leave teaching. I actually had applied, and then I was drawn towards art therapy anyway. So I had that initial hope and applying for art therapy courses, and I actually wanted to do art therapy more than I wanted to leave teaching. So there's sometimes you can have that message that, say, if you hate your job but you don't know where to go, that can be really stressful and really challenging. But if you absolutely are really excited about going to a new place, a new venture, and about what the next step is, that can make leaving and ending the thing a lot easier. And our lives can be like that generally. And I suppose I'm talking about this because there were a lot of big challenges for me being me, just purely being me. And me as a little girl that started a period when mum was poorly must have had an impact on me, and feeling kind of not really understanding where all this blood was coming from. I started before we even did the talk, so I was quite early, like especially back then. We hadn't even done the talk in school to understand what was going on, and so I had no clue. And I started maybe one of the first people in my class, I think. So it was quite a tough time. But because people didn't really talk about it so much then, you had these adverts and everything, but people didn't really talk about periods, and you didn't really know what was going on. It was a little bit hush-hush. Then I didn't really know what to expect, and it was really hard for me to work through what to do. And I often had a lot of period pains, which I just assumed were normal, assumed that was just part of being a girl, being a woman, but really that was part of my condition that I had of having fibroids and cysts and things like that, and polyps, and goodness knows what else might have developed if I'd not had a hysterectomy in the end. But I suppose at the end of the day, so I'd made this piece of artwork from my own blood, and I made a piece. It was very quick. It was almost a bit like using ink. So like I recreated one using ink like a couple of days later, and then I'd shared it on social media, and there was a lot of shock, and there was a lot of, oh, that's disgusting, no. And I did feel a bit embarrassed. I felt a bit overwhelmed, like maybe a bit unhinged, like had I shared too much, and had that gone too much, what will people think of me, that judgment and that worry. But essentially what this is all about is that people will judge, and it's really unfair that women have such a hard time. Like, periods are such natural things, like that it's part of creation, it's people's bodies, it's such a natural thing that happens. And it's the same on the opposite side, on menopause, perimenopause, because people have this narrative, especially like I'm in sort of Gen X era sort of generation, but people didn't necessarily talk about those things back then, and I mean for my parents even less so. And it's the same for like nowadays, people starting to talk a bit more about hormones, and starting to talk about, you know, moon cycles and your periods, and how like energy levels in your periods at different times, and also about how the psychological impact of all of that. But essentially, the bottom line of this, which I firmly believe, is that because there isn't the research, this is one part of it, because there isn't the research and because of the way that women are treated when they maybe go to the doctors about like their struggles, their health, and or they've got this expectation that you should just get on with it. Because of that, people are put in a place where they feel alone, where they feel that there's something wrong with them, intrinsically wrong with them, rather than something medical that needs to be addressed. Whereas if they felt free and able to express themselves and feel like heard and believed and understood, then people's stress levels would be much lower. So chances are these things wouldn't maybe grow so big, or chances are there'd be like earlier screening of these sorts of things. When a girl says about having period pains, it wouldn't just be dismissed as, well, that's what periods do, but actually, just suck it up, love, sort of thing. Where I've had that even from other women telling me when I've complained about my periods, just get on with it. You're like, well, actually, you don't know what my periods are like. You're judging it based on your level of distress. Whereas I was then feeling that this was a conversation about a race, like obstacle racing while you've got your period, and lots of people can just be so debilitated while they're on the period that they can barely even walk out the door. Like sometimes I've had to ring in sick from work when I've been on my period and it's been really heavy and I've not had that. I've just been so exhausted. And I'm telling you this because my reason for sharing the video about painting with my period blood, which is just like on a block now, I think it's like a private video, was that I wanted to express something, and I wanted to express something within me and really like have that connection and have that cathartic expression. But then I panicked. I didn't have the sort of the confidence and the tenacity to sort of stay within my power with that and to kind of stand my ground and talk about the why, because it was something that I was maybe testing out. There was a time urgency about that. I needed to, if I was going to make a piece of art, it's thrown in the bin now, I've just got photographs, but if I was going to make a piece of art, that was the only opportunity that I had 2 years ago, March. That was the only opportunity I had, because I was then going on medication, which then stopped my periods, put me in a medical menopause instantly. So cognitively, I didn't have the words really or the confidence to be able to stand my ground and say, this is why I'm sharing all of this stuff about my womanhood, about my periods, about my identity. And whereas there was an urgency to make that art and there was a pull about it. But then hopefully somebody's seen it and thought, actually, that could be quite an interesting an interesting take on this. And ultimately, I'm sharing this now because there's lots of things that people feel stuck about talking about, and then they feel that they're the only ones that experience those things, or they feel that there's shame to talk about them. But actually, the shame is created from silence. The more silent we are about topics that are challenging, like mental health equally is just as a shaming and stigma topic, where people feel that they can't talk about it because they might be the only one that's experiencing that. For instance, if someone's in a high-powered job or very successful and then struggling with their mental health, they are more likely to hide away than seek help. And that's when things like can go on a bit of a nosedive. Whereas it takes courage to ask for help, and it takes courage to step out and lead people in a way that's kind of, being the one that then makes a piece of art that is then in flow to represent that. So this is what I'm doing here now. I'm just using some of those colours that are maybe remind me of that time, and that some of this, like we've got a lot of this is flowing, but there was a lot of pain. So these sort of jaggy lines, kind of that severe pain in my abdomen, and like severe headaches from the anemia. And I'd often say, oh, I'm tired, but actually it wasn't just tired, it was just like flat out fatigue. And an extra layer of this is that kind of thing, that necessity to have a hysterectomy, and that frustration, but also that optimism that I'm going to feel better afterwards because all of this pain will go away. And then what I didn't really imagine was the emotional pain from it, because as I said previously, I don't have any children, and it wasn't part of, I've not actively said I don't want children, but I've not actively got into a situation to have children intentionally. Like I've not been in the relationships where we've had children, the timing's never been right, and then I've been ill. So then having that sudden realisation that obviously I knew that what the situation was going to be, but having that kind of sudden grief, that sort of, that weirdness, it's sort of grief but sort of not. It's not a bereavement type grief, but it's a loss still of my life never going to be able to have children, not biological children anyway. And so actually these are the sorts of things, what I'm modelling here is, and riffing on, is that the fact that there's so many different things that can be held within us and not expressed. And the whole point of me holding space for people inside the Creative Flow programme, the group programme, 4-month programme, we've got that sustained amount of time so that people can really explore what's going on for themselves, where their art is, what they're expressing, what they believe in, what they value, and where they want to go. The whole point is that it's helping people to really express what they're at without that fear of judgment, and they can make that decision about what it is that they express and to who, whether it's something that they express for themselves or something that they want to communicate to somebody else. And that is why, sort of my why really, as to why I know that it's so important, because I don't want to get to the end of my life feeling that I've held back, or feeling that I had some things to say and I wasn't being true to myself, I wasn't being really me, and I'm sure you don't either. So if this resonates with you, let me know, give it a like and a share and a follow and all that jazz. And if you want to find out about what's going on with the Creative Flow programme, there's some other videos out and about and posts and things that you can watch and really get to know me and what I stand for and what it's going to be like. But you can send me a message with any questions or anything like that. But thanks for watching. My name's Leslie. I'm an artist and an art therapist, and this is my painting of the day. Cheerio. Bye bye bye. Take care. Let's turn this off. Bye.